Welcome to this special episode of Focus Black Oklahoma. I'm Kuma Roberts, and today we're reflecting on this summer's most talked about political events, the Republican and Democratic National Conventions. Two gatherings, two cities, two very different visions for America, and we're here to unpack what it all means.
I'm Jacob Littlebear. Over the next hour, we're going to walk you through moments from both conventions. What stood out, what was left unsaid, and how it all impacts marginalized communities, women's reproductive rights, and Oklahoma's unique economic challenges.
The Republican National Convention, or RNC, in Milwaukee, July 15th through the 18th, carried an unmistakable tone of urgency. Delegates rallied around traditional values, but one delegate provided a unique perspective on the polarizing times.
Elected officials have always been a reflection of the constituents they represent. And as districts have become more Democrat or more Republican, where there's not as many districts that are as competitive, those elected officials have become reflections of the wings of their party. And I don't blame the elected officials. It's the constituents that have pushed them in those directions. And I don't know if the constituents even know how right or left they've become or what their philosophies are. And so is it people like to blame the media that they're directing it, or social media, or everything else? But it truly is this reflection of the population. And so you can't say that we're becoming divided when it's the actual populace that's creating the division.
That was New York delegate Jeff Williams, whose years of political work have made him familiar with the agricultural issues that are facing Oklahomans.
Meanwhile, the Democratic National Convention, or DNC, in Chicago, which occurred August 19th through the 22nd, had a completely different energy, optimism, and a focus on progress. There was a sense that the future could be more inclusive. Kamala Harris, in particular, became a symbol of that optimism. As a reminder for listeners, the RNC occurred before President Joe Biden dropped out of the race.
My name is Jakia Pendleton Harrison. I am the president of Young Democrats of Oklahoma, and I am in Chicago, Illinois, as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. I've been president of Young Democrats of Oklahoma since June of 2023.
Tell me, now that you're here, now that we have the Harris-Walz ticket, why do you believe this is the ticket for Black Oklahomans, young Oklahomans, Oklahomans in general?
So, young Oklahomans in particular, they were looking for something to attach to about this upcoming November election. And currently what we have is a level of excitement that we haven't seen probably since Barack Obama ran for office. It's not just because Kamala Harris is a Black woman, an AAPI woman, but it's really because of some of the issues that she stands for as well. When you're discussing criminal justice reform, she actually tried to take on the task of criminal justice reform in California and succeeded in some areas.
Two conventions, two visions of America's future. But what do these conventions tell us about the state of the country and their impact on everyday people, particularly those who have been historically marginalized?
In this episode, we'll break down how each party addressed the issues that matter most, from the struggles of rural Oklahomans to women's reproductive rights to how each side envisions the future of the nation. The RNC wasn't just a political gathering. It felt like a rallying cry for those who believed their way of life was under siege. The message? Traditional American values need to be defended, and fast. The tone was intense, urgent, and unyielding.
For Focus Black Oklahoma, much of our mission in attending both conventions was to highlight the issues facing marginalized communities in Oklahoma. Both groups are underrepresented in the media landscape. In Milwaukee, some delegates met the week prior to the big convening to revise and redraft the Republican National Platform. The Republicans greatly reduced the size of their official platform, settling on a series of bullet points. They are the following: seal the border and stop the migrant invasion.
Carry out the largest deportation operation in American history.
End inflation and make America affordable again.
Make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far.
Stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower.
Large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips.
Defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms.
Prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and in the Middle East, and build a Great Dome missile defense shield over our entire country, all made in America.
End the weaponization of the government against the American people.
Stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish the foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders.
Rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again.
Strengthen and modernize our military, making it, without question, the strongest and most powerful in the world.
Keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency.
Fight for and protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes for the retirement age.
Cancel the electric vehicle mandate and cut costly and burdensome regulations.
Cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, radical gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children.
Keep men out of women's sports.
Deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again.
Secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter identification and paper ballots, and proof of citizenship.
Unite our country by bringing it to new and record levels of success. Oklahoma State Senator Nathan Dahm made the journey to Milwaukee to serve in multiple capacities. As both the Oklahoma Republican Party chairman and a state senator from Broken Arrow representing District 33, he believes the Donald Trump campaign is the winning ticket for every demographic in his district.
I mean, the Republican National Convention is for the entire nation, obviously, and we have Republicans in every single state. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about how, Bill and I were actually talking about this, how there's more registered Republicans in California than there are even people in the state of Oklahoma, our entire population, let alone Republicans. So this party platform is for the entire country, but there's things in there that absolutely impact Oklahomans, especially when it talks about that we want more energy independence. I mean, that is, one of the most important sectors that we have in Oklahoma that impacts the entire country. When it talks about the high prices of other goods, we're thankfully we have still lower gas prices than most of the country because of our energy sector. But when it comes to groceries and all those other things, even though Oklahoma has a good cost of living, we're feeling the crunch just like everybody else when it comes to groceries and stuff. So there's so many things in the platform that apply to all Oklahomans, not just Republicans, because everyone is experiencing the effects of the failed Biden administration with their economic policies. And so that's one of the main things that President Trump, I mean, he's known as a businessman. We saw how prosperous the country was under 4 years of him. We've seen how devastating 4 years of the Biden administration have been. I think if people compare those two for that reason alone, with nothing else, I think the obvious choice is President Trump. And I think the majority of Oklahomans will make that choice.
That sense of urgency to elect former President Donald Trump was hard to ignore. It was as if every speech, every moment was framed around the belief that America's future was on the line, and the Republican Party was the last line of defense.
Now, in contrast, the energy shifted entirely at the DNC. There was optimism in the air, hopeful conversations about the future, about diversity, about inclusion. It felt less like a rally and more like a celebration of what America could be. Arturo Alonso Sandoval is the state representative for House District 89 in South Oklahoma City.
I am 25 years old. I'm currently serving as the youngest state representative, the youngest legislator in Oklahoma. I do come from a family of immigrant parents from Mexico. And I do think the Harris Walls ticket is incredibly representative of someone like myself because they're running on issues that really mean a lot to young people, a lot of young Oklahomans. Things like the climate change, things like making sure that the economy works better for my generation. And a lot of young people in Oklahoma, I think, have their challenges when it comes to engaging with politics. But since Biden decided to put the nation first and step to the side and let Harris be the presidential pick, it's been amazing. And I think there's been a huge resurgence and momentum from the young crowd.
It was clear that the Democratic Party wanted to show it was moving forward towards a future where everyone had a place, a voice, and an opportunity. But that optimism came with its own challenges. Many of the issues discussed were the same issues that have plagued the nation for decades. The difference was the hope for progress. Vice President Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, presented, quote, a new way forward, end quote, which focuses on rebuilding the middle class through loans that support small businesses and homeownership, cutting taxes, and lowering energy and prescription drug costs. There is a 13-chapter plan on their website, KamalaHarris.com, that details their policies on all the above and more. Each chapter provides more substance than Trump's 20-point agenda.
So, as we compare these two conventions, we see a stark contrast. The RNC was about protecting the past, standing firm in tradition. The DNC was about moving forward, about progress, about building a new version of America. Two conventions, two worldviews. The atmosphere at the RNC wasn't just charged, it was electric, as though everyone was gearing up for a fight. There was a deep sense that America's values were under threat and the future of the country hinged on the election of their candidate. Here's country and Western star Lee Greenwood at the convention.
Prayer works. This nation based on faith. Prayer works. Because he was sure, as Donald Trump turned his head just slightly, that the bullet missed him just enough to save his life to be the next president of the United States. We have believed for so long that God will make some changes in this country, and he's about to make a change in the current administration and send them home. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. Tonight we make the decision on what's right for America. More prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, the 45th President of the United States and soon to be the 47th President of the United States, please welcome Donald J. Trump.
There was also an effort to broaden the Republican base, challenging stereotypes and emphasizing that the party wasn't just for one demographic. The voices heard at the RNC were proud, defiant, and determined to reclaim what they believed was being lost. Vanessa Cunningham is a Tulsan and a Trump enthusiast.
I think that President Trump is a great candidate, and I think he is the choice over President Biden. And the reason why I say that, because one of the things that infuriated me that Biden said was that if you don't vote Democrat, you're not black. And I felt like he was speaking for the race, and I think that it was unprofessional of him. But what it also showed is how they have the black Americans in their hand. They think that they can feed them different things, different promises, but they don't actually meet those promises. So I feel like it's a wake-up call to Black America. I know a lot of people in...
And here's Stephen Davis, a 40-year-old Black conservative journalist with Turning Points USA, on why he supports Trump and is against critical race theory.
I think typically candidates get into the identity politic game. I don't like that. I don't like identity politics. At the end of the day, we're all American, right? But President Trump is the type of person who treats us as Americans instead of Joe Biden treating us as some type of pet project instead of people who are equal. So it is incumbent on me to vote for those who are going to do what's best for the American people and not try to pander simply for votes. And that's why I see the Democrat Party doing en masse. Right? They typically pander for the sake of votes every 2 to 4 years, and then every 2 to 4 years they drop the black community like a bad habit. So I'm sick of seeing that. I'm sick of I'm trying to get people to wake up to this reality and help them understand that when you're just looked upon as a simple American, as anybody else in this land, then things tend to go better, right? We get away from we ditch the identity politics and get back to what real patriotism and Americanism is, and it's one people under God. And my top issue is critical race theory, which is putting person against person, race against race, people against people, and it's definitely having devastating effects on America and Americans. It's a Marxist ideology. It's birthed in Marxism, and Marxism hasn't worked anywhere in the world, in the known world. You look at all the different countries that implement Marxism and socialism and all these different ideologies, and I think it's very detrimental to all these different countries, and they never recovered, right? And when it comes to America and Americans, again, it's a divide and conquer tactic. It's putting white against black. It's saying that we have to look at everything through a lens of race in which all we see are power structures, and within these power structures are systemic racism and white privilege, both of which can be completely debunked.
Now switch gears to the DNC, and you immediately feel the contrast. Optimism filled the air, a stark difference from the urgency felt in Milwaukee. The DNC was less about defending the past and more about building the future, especially when it came to diversity and inclusion.
Democracy isn't just a bunch of abstract principles and dusty laws in some book somewhere. It's the values we live by. It's the way we treat each other, including those who don't look like us, or pray like us, or see the world exactly like we do. That sense of mutual respect has to be part of our message. Our politics have become so polarized these days that all of us across the political spectrum seem so quick to assume the worst in others, unless they agree with us on every single issue. We start thinking that the only way to win is to scold and shame and out-yell the other side. And after a while, regular folks just tune out, or they don't bother to vote. Now, that approach may work for the politicians who just want attention and thrive on division, but it won't work for us. To make progress on the things we care about, the things that really affect people's lives, we need to remember that we've all got our blind spots and contradictions and prejudices, and that if we want to win over those who aren't yet ready to support our candidates, we need to listen to their concerns and maybe learn something in the process. After all, if a parent or grandparent occasionally says something that makes us cringe, we don't automatically assume they're bad people. We recognize that the world is moving fast, that they need time and maybe a little encouragement to catch up. Our fellow citizens deserve the same grace we hope they'll extend to us. That's how we can build a true democratic majority, one that can get things done. And by the way, that does not just matter to the people in this country. The rest of the world is watching to see if we can actually pull this off.
Kamala Harris, as the first woman of color on a major party ticket running for president of the United States, is a symbol of that future. Her presence brought a level of excitement that echoed throughout the event. People weren't just talking about change, they were celebrating it, believing that they were part of something bigger, something historic. Just listen to State Representative Regina Goodwin from House District 73 in Tulsa.
I'm Regina Goodwin, been in office 9 years as state representative. I've been blessed to now serve as senator-elect, and it's exhilarating to be here. And we absolutely, as a pledged delegate, absolutely all of my heart and soul is into VP Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz. This is a fantastic ticket, and it is right for America. It's the right time. We've got to move forward. We can't look back. We're not going back. And what they represent is all that's positive about America. They represent a diversity that is needed, that show us at our best selves. And so it's exciting. And it is about freedom. This is about democracy. This is about people being as loud as they want to be on this bus as we travel over to McCormick. And that's absolutely essential, because what we are looking at, Project 25, is absolute trash. And when you talk about trying to dismantle our Department of Education, when you're talking about Medicaid expansion and folks wanting to do away with that, Trump is not the answer. He is a divider. So we're going to talk about those folks that unite us. And that's when you talk about Harris, and that's when you talk about Walz. So when we work, we win.
That feeling of belonging, of being a part of a broader movement, was palpable. The DNC wasn't just about political strategy. It was about creating a space where everyone felt included, where marginalized voices were front and center. It was a stark contrast to the posture of the RNC, where the focus was on holding the line rather than expanding the tent.
But for all its hope and optimism, the DNC also had its share of frustrations. While many attendees celebrated progress, others reminded us that the issues being discussed were the same ones the country has faced for decades. Janice Talley is a delegate from Georgia.
I have a 26-year-old daughter who is a 2020 graduate of Northwestern University in communication and journalism. She told me 2 years ago that she doesn't want to have children. And I asked her why. And she said the world is not kind to us. Us meaning Black girls and Black boys. I'm looking for freedom. I'm looking for peace. I'm looking for an opportunity to be all that we can be in a space that celebrates who we are. Maybe the celebration won't come immediately, but I'm looking for opportunity for my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren to have a place they can call home and be comfortable and safe in that home and not always fighting for space. I'm exhausted right now, 58 years old, for fighting for space. And I think my mom was onto something. You were in Oklahoma, Tulsa. We were thriving. We had banks, we had schools, we had doctors, we had our own post office. We were thriving. And what happened? We do okay. So not necessarily we need to have separation of that nature, but I want a place that my kids can be proud of and want children and want to bring children into this world, that live in a world that cares about global warming, live in a world that cares about their brownness and celebrates their brownness. And I think it can happen.
That's where the DNC drew its strength. And it wasn't just about speeches and promises, it was about action. The message was clear. The future was something to be built, not just hoped for. And while the RNC was focused on preserving the past, the DNC was focused on building a more inclusive future.
One of the defining aspects of both the Republican and Democratic national conventions was how they addressed or didn't address marginalized communities and immigration. At the RNC, there was a clear effort to appeal to Black voters and other underrepresented groups. Makeda Thompson is a recent transplant to Tulsa.
I think that President Trump is the right person for Black women in Oklahoma because he has done a great deal for the African American community, more than any other president since I've been born has done. He had a plan laid out for Black businesses, for men, Black women, and for Black men that unfortunately he wasn't able to execute. He gave money to Black colleges, and he also even took the time to form coalitions that were orientated towards women, Black women, towards Black voices, like in terms of Black voices for Trump.
There was a sense that while the party was making overtures to marginalized communities, those communities weren't always convinced. The messaging often centered around individualism, the idea that all Americans should be seen as equal without special treatment for any one group. This sentiment was particularly heated surrounding immigration. Here again is Oklahoma State Senator Dom.
The other thing I would say is the open borders situation. We're seeing so many illegal immigrants coming across the country, entering our country illegally. And yes, a lot of them do work in the agricultural sector, and they do that. But if we did not have that huge influx of people coming here illegally, which we shouldn't have, and President Trump has been very clear on that, on stopping the immigration coming in and deporting people that are here illegally, well, then those jobs would be opened to Americans, to Oklahomans, rather than to illegal immigrants that shouldn't be in this country anyways. And so as the Republican Party, we believe in the rule of law. And we are not anti-immigrant, we are pro-immigrant. Our country is a nation of immigrants. We just want it to be done legally, not illegal immigrants. So yes, we absolutely support legal migrants coming here and working in a legal manner. We just don't want it to be done illegally. And the focus should be on the American worker.
Still, for many, the RNC's messaging around immigration felt more unwelcoming than Dom would have one believe. Though Republicans were quick to blame the border crisis on Biden and Harris, Democrats pointed at Trump's influence on conservative Congress members to vote down a bipartisan plan. Here's President Biden.
I never thought I'd stand before a crowd of Democrats and refer to a president as a liar so many times. No, I'm not trying to be funny. It's sad. Trump continues to lie about the border. Here's what he won't tell you. Trump killed the strongest bipartisan border deal in the history of the United States that we negotiated with the Senate Republicans. Took 4 weeks. Once it passed, and they acknowledged the most expansive border change in American history. He called senators to say, don't support the bipartisan bill, because he said it would help me politically and hurt him politically. My God. No, I'm serious. Think about it. Not a joke. Ask even the press who doesn't like me. They'll tell you that's true. Typically Trump, once again, putting himself first and America last. Then I had to take executive action. The result of the executive action I took, border encounters have dropped over 50%. In fact, there are fewer border crossings today than when Donald Trump left office. And unlike Trump, we will not demonize immigrants, saying they're the poison of blood of America, poison the blood of our country. Kamala and I are committed to strengthening legal immigration, including protecting dreamers and more. And here's what else I believe in. Protecting your freedom to vote, your freedom to love who you love. And your freedom to choose.
And here's Sheriff Javier Salazar of Bexar County, Texas, at the DNC.
On the other side of the border, the traffickers, they pack migrants into 18-wheelers like cattle, 50, 100 at a time. Then they seal the doors. That's when the 911 calls come. We hear them, desperate, terrified, gasping for air. Now, sometimes we get there in time. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, we can't. When Donald Trump comes down to Texas, stands next to officers in uniforms just like mine, he's not there to help us. Don't think that, not for a second. He is a self-serving man. Just like when he killed the border bill, he just made our jobs harder. Now, Kamala, on the other hand, has been fighting border crime for years. She's gone down to Mexico and worked to stop the traffickers. And when the traffickers didn't stop, she put them in jail. Now, down in my neck of the woods, we call that fooling around and finding out.
Congressman Steve Scalise, Majority Leader of the House of Representatives, struck a different tone on this issue at the RNC.
On the border, Biden and Harris opened it up to the entire world. Prisons are being emptied. President Trump and a Republican majority will repass H.R. 2, the strongest border security bill in decades. We will lock down the border, and yes, we will finish building the wall. Our most sacred right as citizens, voting. Biden and Harris want illegals to vote now that they've opened up the border. Republicans will repass the SAVE Act to block illegal aliens from voting in our elections.
The situation at the border and immigration remain divisive topics in the country. According to a recent Gallup poll, significantly more U.S. adults than a year ago, 55% versus 41%, would like to see immigration to the U.S. decreased. This is the first time since 2005 that a majority of Americans have wanted there to be less immigration, and this figure is the largest percentage holding that view since a 58% reading in 2001. The record high was 65% recorded in 1993 and 1995.
Though encounters with migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border have fallen sharply in 2024, according to Pew Research Center, the rising cost of healthcare, crime, and other issues are being blamed on illegal immigration. Clashes between residents and immigrants in sanctuary cities like Chicago only give rise to the unease.
So while both conventions spoke to marginalized groups and immigration, they did so in fundamentally different ways. The RNC focused on individualism, on the idea that every American is equal and should be treated the same, and that the U.S.-Mexico border requires a tougher policy. The DNC, on the other hand, emphasized that equality also means equity, recognizing the unique challenges that different groups face and working to address them.
And that's the crux of the debate. Do we achieve equality by treating everyone the same, or by recognizing the differences in experience and making sure everyone has what they need to succeed? It's a question that both parties are still grappling with, especially when it comes to women's reproductive rights.
Donald Trump touts that the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which paved the way for over a third of the states in the country to ban almost all abortions, is one of the crowning achievements of his presidency. Yet, the topic was barely mentioned on the main stage at the RNC.
Even his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, who posted on X that he was, quote, as pro-life as anyone, end quote, didn't speak directly or indirectly on abortion in his acceptance speech. But on the convention floor, others were adamant their voices be heard.
And Roe v. Wade was not an abortion case. I'm a lawyer. Roe v. Wade was a states' rights case, and that's it. Now, don't be lazy. Go and do your work. Get your people on your side, and you'll have it the way you want it.
So, what happens for people that live in states?
Yes, I think that's a bunch of bullshit. People get around. You know, they can travel if they want to travel. And you know what? If it's that important to them, then go to the other state that represents your position. I think it's a very small amount of people that find themselves in that position. So, you know, I like the least amount of intrusion in everyone's life by government. So,
gotcha.
I'm a small government girl.
Yeah.
You know, and I like people to have as much freedom as they want and, you know, as they can have, because I believe we're born with these freedoms. And I'm giving consent to the government to curtail my freedoms in order to, you know, represent minorities and to, you know, protect them. Right?
That was Jill Quenzel with Justice Prevails, LLC, a faith-based legal consulting firm in Palm Beach, Florida. The Republican Party framed itself as the guardians of life, emphasizing traditional family values and the sanctity of unborn children. However, the fact that abortion wasn't discussed more often at the RNC might be one way in which the Republicans are shifting their stance to court a younger, working-class demographic.
But some older Republicans remain firm in their stance. Again, we hear from Makeda Thompson.
The current day policies that are valuable to me is pro-life. That's number one. You know, everyone knows that life begins in conception. And as soon as a woman becomes pregnant, she is carrying a life in her. No matter what the Democrats say, it's a person.
For many delegates in both parties, abortion is the central moral issue that drives their political engagement. However, some attendees at the DNC expressed concerns that the GOP's rigid stance on reproductive rights didn't leave room for nuance or for the lived experiences of women across the country.
Today, because of Donald Trump, more than 1 in 3 women of reproductive age in America lives under an abortion ban. A second Trump term would rip away even more of our rights. Passing a national abortion ban, letting states monitor pregnancies and prosecute doctors, restricting birth control and fertility treatments. We cannot let that happen. We need to vote as if lives depend on it, because they do.
That was Amanda and Josh Zarowski, who are suing the state of Texas because they were denied abortion care and lost their baby. At the convention, Democrats positioned themselves as the party that would protect and expand reproductive rights. The DNC's message was one of choice, empowering women to make decisions about their own bodies and health without interference from the government. Hadley Duvall from Kentucky shares her traumatic experience.
Growing up, I was an all-American girl. Varsity soccer captain, cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, and Survivor. I was raped by my stepfather after years of sexual abuse. At age 12, I took my first pregnancy test, and it was positive. That was the first time I was ever told, you have options. I can't imagine not having a choice. But today, that's the reality for many women and girls across the country because of Donald Trump's abortion bans. He calls it a beautiful thing. What is so beautiful about a child having to carry her parent's child? There are other survivors out there who have no options. And I want you to know that we see you. We hear you. Kamala Harris will sign a national law to restore the right to an abortion. She will fight for every woman and every girl, even those who are not fighting for her.
The issue of reproductive rights wasn't just a talking point at the DNC. It was a central theme. Speakers made it clear that the future of Roe v. Wade, and by extension, women's access to safe and legal abortion, was on the ballot.
But it wasn't just about abortion. The DNC framed reproductive rights as part of a broader conversation about healthcare and economic justice, arguing that access to contraception, prenatal care, and maternity leave were all essential components of supporting women and families.
The message was clear. The Democratic Party was positioning itself as the safe harbor of not just women's reproductive rights, but of women's healthcare as a whole. Due to their silence on the issue, the contrast with the RNC couldn't have been more pronounced.
At the RNC, the conversation on the morality of abortion and the protection of life were barely mentioned. Though pro-life supporters filled the arena, the DNC, meanwhile, framed reproductive rights as an issue of personal freedom and economic equality, one that extended beyond abortion to encompass all aspects of women's health care.
These two approaches to reproductive rights reflect the broader ideological divide between the parties. For the Republicans, protecting life at all costs is a moral imperative, even if it wasn't openly discussed. For the Democrats, ensuring that women have autonomy over their bodies is a fundamental right tied to issues of healthcare, economic stability, and justice.
And this divide isn't just political. It's deeply personal for millions of women across the country. As we continue to grapple with these issues, the question remains, whose vision will shape the future of women's healthcare in America? When it comes to the economy, Oklahoma faces a unique set of challenges that were addressed, albeit in very different ways, at both conventions. For many Oklahomans, economic stability hinges on rural jobs, agriculture, and oil, which the Republican Party has long championed.
President Trump has done a tremendous job in making sure that the way of life of rural Oklahomans is supported. The conservative values of Oklahomans we reject. This left-wing woke ideology is being pushed onto us from the federal government, from the Biden administration, their agenda that's anti-Christian, anti-family. President Trump supports the family. He supports people of faith. And so you're going to see that in the rural communities. They're going to be 100% behind him in everything that he does. Lower taxes, strong America. That's what President Trump has done.
And for minority Oklahoma.
Yeah. He has protected individual rights and strengthened the American economy like never before, which for minority Oklahomans, minority Americans, has given them a much better quality of life, protected their religious liberties. You've seen success in minority communities like never before because of President Trump's policies.
That was Oklahoma Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters. At the RNC, the emphasis was on bringing back manufacturing jobs from overseas, reducing taxes, and keeping the government out of the way. Many delegates expressed their satisfaction with the Trump administration's economic policies. Here's Minnesota's Tom Emmer.
Donald Trump also fought for Minnesota workers and farmers, fighting back against Chinese trade abuses, ending NAFTA, and replacing it with the USMCA. Joe Biden voted for NAFTA and China's entry into the WTO, devastating Minnesota's economy. And Kamala Harris, she opposed tariffs on China. Of course, when they aren't outsourcing our jobs through bad trade deals, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are destroying them through taxes and regulation. They are America last.
At the DNC, the conversation around the economy was very different. The Democrats emphasized the need to transition to a more diverse economy, one that would create new jobs and address issues like sustaining small businesses and economic inequality, while also increasing taxes for corporations. Ken Chenault, the former CEO and chairman of American Express, believes the policies of Vice President Harris will do more to help the country's middle class.
She understands it's possible, in fact necessary, for a president to be both pro-business and pro-worker. Kamala Harris understands that government must work in partnership with the business community. She knows that a market-based economy needs a strong and effective government. Kamala Harris understands that we need to help entrepreneurs turn good ideas into thriving companies, that we can create good-paying jobs by helping manufacturers expand. Kamala Harris believes in growing the economic pie for the benefit of current and future generations. Unlike her opponent, she knows the way not to build an advanced economy is a broad tariff that would only raise prices, hurt consumers and businesses, and cost jobs. She knows the way not to do it is to give people like me a tax cut when that money should be invested to grow the middle class.
At the DNC, speakers framed the transition to an opportunity economy as not only an environmental necessity, but as an economic imperative, if they were willing to embrace change. Oklahoma is a right-to-work state, which prohibits the requirement of union membership as a condition of employment. The Sooner State was not always a right-to-work state. Here's Elizabeth Schuler, president of the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, more commonly known as the AFL-CIO.
Representing nearly 13 million American workers, this election is about two economic visions. One where families live paycheck to paycheck, where people have no right to join a union. A CEO's dream, but a worker's nightmare. Or an opportunity economy, where we lower the costs of groceries, prescriptions, and housing. Where we go after big pharma, corporate landlords, and price gougers. Where there's no such thing as a man's job or a woman's job, or like Donald Trump would say, a black job. Just a good union job. That's the future our President Joe Biden has fought for. And that's the future Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will keep fighting for. Let's build it together.
The DNC also focused heavily on issues of economic inequality. For many speakers, the current system isn't working for large parts of the population, especially those in rural communities like many in Oklahoma. Lots of attendees at the DNC argued that economic recovery needs to go beyond job creation. It's about ensuring that people can earn a living wage, have access to affordable health care, and send their kids to good schools.
And that's where the two conventions diverged. At the RNC, the focus was on continuing the economic recovery through traditional industries like oil, manufacturing, and lowering taxes. At the DNC, the focus was on reimagining the economy, moving toward green energy, addressing inequality, and investing in education and healthcare. So the question for Oklahomans and for the country as a whole is, which vision will guide us into the future? Do we hold on to the industries and policies that built our past, or do we embrace a new, more inclusive economy? As we've heard throughout the conventions, the Republican and Democratic parties aren't just offering different policies. They're offering entirely different visions for the future of America. These differences go beyond simple political disagreements.
At the Republican National Convention, the message was that the GOP is the party of tradition, national security, and economic growth through individualism. The Republican platform affirmed a return to core American values by placing the blame for the economy, as well as other issues, on the current administration.
To Bidenflation, the highest rate of inflation in my lifetime, devastating hardworking families with skyrocketing prices for groceries, gas, and utilities. To Biden's violent crime crisis, fueled by Democrats' pro-criminal sanctuary cities and defund the police policies like we have seen in my home state of New York. All while corrupt Democrat prosecutors and judges wage illegal and unconstitutional lawfare against President Trump in an effort to do Joe Biden's political bidding.
That was Elise Stefanik, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from New York. The Republican Party positioned itself as the protector of American values, defending the Constitution and emphasizing individual liberty. This wasn't just about policy. It was about preserving a way of life that many in the GOP believe is under threat.
On the other hand, the Democratic National Convention presented itself as the party of progress, focused on addressing systemic inequality, climate change, and healthcare. The DNC's vision was less about preserving the past and more about building a future that's inclusive and just. Here's Caroline Wonga, CEO of Essence Ventures.
Worst thing that can happen is for black women and white women not to do this together. And to learn how to kill like you kill them. So sisters, I ask you simply for this. May we unite our uteruses and make sure that those that came before us and gave us a baton are not disappointed because we didn't move it further ahead. And that we celebrate the fact that now our job is to finally find the second woman vice president of the country. As well as potentially put a girl in the White House. Y'all know what we gotta do that.
That focus on inclusivity and progress permeated every aspect of the DNC. While the Republicans focused on individualism, the Democrats emphasized community, arguing that for America to thrive, it must address the needs of those who have historically been left behind.
The two parties also took different approaches to government. At the RNC, the message was that the government should be limited, interfering as little as possible in the lives of individuals and businesses. This was especially clear in the discussions around healthcare and taxes. Republicans at the convention argued that the best way to ensure economic growth and personal freedom was to reduce government intervention, lower taxes, and trust the free market to provide opportunities for all.
At the DNC, however, the conversation was very different. Democrats emphasized the role of government as a tool for creating equity, whether through expanding access to healthcare, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in homeownership and small businesses.
The DNC's vision wasn't just about providing opportunities, it was about ensuring that everyone had the support they needed to succeed. For Democrats, the government isn't the problem, it's part of the solution. Another major difference between the parties was how they framed America's role in the world. The RNC emphasized a strong national defense and the idea of American exceptionalism, positioning the U.S. as the leader of the free world and a country that should put its own interests first. Here again is Oklahoma Senator Dom.
We understand that there are people from overseas that, might be able to fill a skill set that there isn't sufficient opportunity here in Oklahoma in Oklahoma or in the entire country. We've seen some of that in the tech sector, where other people have come in for that as well. But one thing that President Trump has focused on is we should be focusing on the American people. So if there is a need there, we need to focus on how do we get people with the correct training in that, so we fill those wage gaps or those job gaps with individuals that are Americans, rather than importing people from other countries to fill that. Now, if it's an immediate need, fill the need as it is, but our long-term trajectory should always be on how do we focus on American workers? How do we focus on Oklahomans in our state? How do we put America first? I mean, obviously that's his slogan, rather than putting other people first. I've lived overseas. I have a heart for other people. I get it, but that's one thing that differentiates liberals and conservatives, Democrats versus Republicans. Liberals, Democrats like to put on a facade about caring for the rest of the world, even though if you statistically look at it, they donate less to charity than almost any other sector. The more liberal you are, the less you donate to charities, the less you donate to other people. When you're more conservative, when you're more God and family oriented, the more you donate to charities, the more you do charitable work, the more you do those things. But what we would say is we need to take care of our neighbors, our communities, Oklahoma first, America first. Then we can look out to the rest of the world, which is what we do. But liberals, there's actually been studies that have proven this, that liberals have a higher regard and empathy towards animals, plants, rocks, nature, inanimate objects than they have towards their own family and friends. So you can tie that into all these things, like when you're talking about immigration.
Meanwhile, at the DNC, the focus was on collaboration and enthusiasm, especially around issues like human rights. The message wasn't just about protecting America's interests, but about ensuring that all have a seat at the table and are valued. Here's author and scholar Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
Y'all know what it is. You know what time it is. I'm just reinforcing what you don't already heard. It's all about that black woman, because black women run the world already. We know that black women are in charge, and we love it. For those who are mad that Kamala ain't doing what you want her to do, imagine a world where an orange apparition has assaulted your sensibility. We done seen what this man gonna do, and he's threatening to do more. We know what January 6th is. It's always January 6th on our calendar, because we see people wilding out every day because they ain't getting what they thought they deserved. So a vote for Kamala is a vote for not only black women, it's a vote for American democracy. It's a vote for best in class of what we represent. Two things and I'm gonna be gone. First of all, for those who are mad that Kamala is a prosecutor or was a prosecutor, you heard the Congresswoman already say, we got neighborhoods where we depend upon the intervention of the police state in order to preserve some kind of dignity. We're not trying to celebrate lawlessness. We just want the cops, when they show up, to understand that we are American citizens, and don't be shooting us, and don't be killing us, and don't be murdering us. Number two, some of people are mad because Kamala ain't got a black man. You had a chance to put a ring on it, you didn't. The white boy stood up. Number three, y'all think, oh my God, you upset with what's going on in the Middle East, so am I. You understand the vicious indifference to the lives of people who have been minoritized, I get it. But if you think that's a trouble now, if you elect somebody else beyond her, what do you think is gonna happen? So let's understand that Kamala Harris ain't Jesus, but what she is a political candidate who is far better than this orange other side we got going on. And let me end by saying this. If you think you're lonely now, wait until tonight, because it's gonna get rough. And as I end all the time, and Freddie Hayes said it yesterday, quote me, but I'm gonna quote myself. When Kamala Harris is inaugurated on King Day by Ketanji Brown Jackson, and her name is Kamala, that's the KKK I like.
The choice before voters is clear. Do we build a society based on individual liberty, or one that seeks to address inequality? This question and many others will shape the future of this country, and the answers lie in the hands of the American people. prominent historians will likely argue forever which American presidential election was the most important, the most consequential. Perhaps it was George Washington's first election or his decision not to run for a third term 8 years later.
Maybe it was shortly after, in the election of 1800, when America witnessed its first peaceful transfer of power when Thomas Jefferson led the, quote, Democratic Republican Revolution, end quote, against our second president, John Adams, in 1800.
Some might argue that it was the election of 1860, which put Abraham Lincoln in office and precipitated the American Civil War over the enslavement of Africans.
Others might consider 1932, with the Great Depression looming overhead and slating Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal on a path to power over economic inequality.
Regardless of opinion, seemingly every election in modern history is billed as, quote, the most important election in history, end quote, and that certainly seems to be true this year. Polls show the race between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump to be razor thin. As we wrap up this special edition of Focus Black Oklahoma, one thing is clear. The Republican and Democratic National Conventions offered two different visions for the future of America.
These conventions weren't just political events. They were two competing ideas about what America should be. The RNC spoke to those who believe that the country's strength lies in its traditions, in its past. The DNC, on the other hand, embraced the idea that America's strength lies in its ability to evolve, to grow, and to adapt to new challenges.
And at the center of all this are the people. Whether it's Oklahomans who depend on the oil industry, young voters rallying behind Kamala Harris, or communities fighting for reproductive rights, the decisions made in the coming years will have a profound impact on the lives of millions.
The question that both conventions leave us with is this: what kind of future do we want? Do we want to revisit a Trump presidency, or do we want to see if Harris can bring change? The answer will shape not only this election, but the future of the nation.
It's a future that will require hard choices, and those choices won't be easy. But as we move forward, one thing is certain: the stakes couldn't be higher. And the decisions we make, both as individuals and as a country, will determine the kind of America we leave behind for future generations.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through the RNC and DNC, and for thinking critically about what these conventions mean for our communities, our state, and our country. We encourage you to stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, make your voice heard at the ballot box. Focus Black Oklahoma is produced in partnership with KOSU Radio and Tri-City Collective. Additional support is provided by the Commemoration Fund and Press Forward.
This 1 hour special was made possible with support from KOSU Radio and Tri-City Collective. Special thanks to Rachel Hubbard, Ryan LaCroix, Robbie Korth, and Lori Walden. Special thanks to FBO correspondents Jamie Glisson and Shonda Little, who brought us this reporting on location in Milwaukee and Chicago.
Our theme music is by Moffett Music. Focus Black Oklahoma's executive producers are Quraish Ali Lansana and Bracken Clark. Our associate producer is Jesse Ulrich.
You can visit us online at kosu.org or focusblackoklahoma.com and on YouTube at Tri-City Collective. You can follow us on Instagram at FocusBlackOK and on Facebook at facebook.com/FocusBlackOK.
You can hear Focus Black Oklahoma on demand for free at kosu.org, the NPR app, npr.org, or wherever you get your podcasts.